an Israeli state, Palestinian state, side by side. Is that something you believe in, you support?
As a girl who served in Gaza and I know how they live in Gaza, you cannot come to us with the guns and we say, no, let's make a peace. It cannot be.
Weird. So, okay, so when you served in Gaza, aka you were a occupation force soldier, canvassing and patrolling their neighborhoods at gunpoint, holding these people at gunpoint in their own land, that's when you said, oh, these people this is how they live. They're so antagonistic when we set foot on their land and tell them what to do and deny them their national and political rights. Tisk.
Honestly, I would be dreaming about a one-state solution.
Yes, that's right. A one-state solution, the state of Palestine, where Jews, Muslims, and Christians can all have equal rights, and there's not this weird inbred Jewish supremacist death cult that is sabotaging and murdering their way to diplomacy.
And I think two states is giving up to this notion of peace is impossible, living together is impossible, when I feel the only way is like to make kind of steps towards each other.
A one-state solution, is that possible then?
With the radical voices that have been rising up now and with all the trauma and pain that people...
Yeah, the radical voices, like, I don't know, inside the Israeli government, like Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who just called the Gaza Strip a real estate bonanza, who, or maybe, you know, the National Security Advisor, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's telling us that they must conquer Gaza. So the Israelis are conquerors now. They're conquerors based on an ideology of religious extremism. Why are they conquering that land? Because the Bible told them they could. Is that not religious extremism? But when she refers to radical voices that are rising up now and how that means that it's tolerable for Palestinians and quote-unquote Israelis to live together, she's talking about Palestinian voices that are being suffocated and annihilated. Those are the voices that are radical, that are crying out from the rubble as they sit on the beach and drink their fake Israeli beers.
People are carrying. Obviously, there's no trust.
The idea of a two-state solution, Israeli state, Palestinian state, side by side, is it something you believe in or not?
I don't believe in it, and there's a lot of reasons for it. You cannot give terrorists power.
If it's not a two-state solution, though, what is the solution?
I agree. You can't give power, and that's why I advocate for the dismantling of the state of Israel.
Israel need to settle more in Judea, Samaria. This is what
You can't give terrorists more power. Next sentence. Israel need to settle more. Okay, so they need to occupy more land. Israel isn't. This is the common shlomo in civilian life in Israeli society. We're not doing enough.
what I think. And what Trump wants, what other people just suggest, that moving people away from Gaza, the ones that want to move away, and the ones that want to stay, let them stay. But should they not vote for Hamas again?
The idea of a two-state solution and
Yeah, do not vote for people that we do not like in your foreign country. We will come and you. How insane is that, to feel so entitled that you can say with confidence, with your full chest, that you have the right to, terrorize people based on who they vote for. And this is, people are gonna be like, well, why did Hamas do October 7th? Well, this was well before October 7th when Hamas was elected in 2007. And there was no October 7th, 2007 or 2008, but there was Operation Cast Lead. There was Operation Days of Penitence. There was Operation Tropic Thunder. No, not that one. But there was Operation Protective Edge, and all of these illegal operations, which Israel calls mowing the lawn, were, violent occupations and massacres, high-tech bloody massacres committed by the occupation army. And that was just simply because they didn't, and they also they created a more harsh blockade ever since the Palestinians elected in what Jimmy Carter called a free and fair election. Israel immediately heightened the blockade and heightened the made the restrictions more severe, because as they claimed, giving anything to letting anything through Gaza was basically helping a terrorist economy. So that gave them the right to like block, you know, chocolate chip cookies and children's puzzles and anything that might be sold in the Gaza market, you know. Well, they can't have that because that's just helping the administrative body. That's a organization. And you know what's really crazy is that for many years since Hamas had become an entity in 1987, from 1987 to 2007, how many years is that? 20 years. So for 2 decades before Hamas won an election and became the administrative power, I put that in quotations because they really weren't, because they're an occupied people. The people that were in power are Israelis, but that notwithstanding, they took power in the Gaza Strip in 2007. And what had the international community been urging Hamas to do? Well, if we look at the historical record, the United States and Europe make clear to Hamas that if they want to be taken seriously, they must participate in an election. And as Norman Finkelstein points out in his book on Gaza, they just committed one egregious mistake. Hamas was not supposed to win the election. That was the mistake that Hamas made. They were too popular. Why were they popular? Why was an armed resistance group born out of the first Intifada, which gained more popularity in the second Intifada, and in the wake of the second Intifada, achieved administrative power? Well, that had to do with the Israeli occupation and the severe, harsh conditions imposed by Israel onto Gaza, which ultimately led to the victory that Hamas had in 2007. And as we say always, radical extremism foments and cultivates and grows from the soil of repression. When you push people to accept that there's only one way that they can resist their slow annihilation, it's kind of your fault. So I don't believe that states that commit genocides have a right to be a state. I think if that needs to be a core policy to your government, then that government should be dismantled. It has no place in modern society. It does have a place, but I'm saying that it shouldn't have a place. And states that commit genocide deserve to have their statehood revoked. You've proven that this is not a national identity that needs to be pursued. So we're asking Israelis to go back to their first country of origin.
An Israeli state, Palestinian state, side by side.
I think it's inevitable. I think the situation
Los Angeles, huh? Is that where you're from?
as it is at the moment kind of proved that we cannot just continue with this like in the middle situation when there's Israeli occupation and there's kind of like we're trying to, I don't know.
Because like look at the beach and look at the view. It's like really nice looking west.
Live with the conflict.
You think it is possible still at this stage?
I'm hopeful, yeah. I mean, even though I have many reasons not to be, I think we don't have a choice but to try to get some kind of an agreement from both sides, because this situation as it is just heartbreaking.
She seems real heartbroken, huh?
We can't live with something who hurts us, who talk about our children, our women, our old...
Already, like even as a child or somebody that just plopped down from space as an alien and looks at this and sees both sides, you can already tell who the honest broker here is, just based on the urgency of the rhetoric and the tone. You know, we listened to, for the past 3.5 minutes of this video, we listened to Israelis talking. They're so unbothered. It's just like they were just, it's almost like they were just having a good time, and then this reporter comes up and stumbles upon them and they're like, let me think about that. I got to start thinking about this now. Well, Palestinians here in Ramallah have a sense of urgency. The truth is very urgent, the violence of the truth causes them to speak with urgency, with honesty, and you can see that clearly here. Thank you, Neat Yeet, for the super chat. As I understand it, the big militant faction preceded Hamas was the PLO. I was wondering if you could educate us about what happened to the PLO. Certainly. The PLO, as I understand it, began honestly and genuinely in the 1960s, and early on in its infancy, it was literally born out of the 1967 war, the war of aggression that Israel started and acquired territory and subsequently occupied and resettled, which, as we all know, the UN calls on Israel, the entire world community calls on Israel to vacate the occupied territories and return to its pre-June 1967 borders. So 1967 onwards, we see, an escalation from Israel, obviously. Well, we also see the opposition to, start to organize, and PLO is that organization. And what I'm trying to say is that throughout the decades of the PLO's administration, they were whittled down and they were ground down by the IDF, by Israel. I mean, they faced assassinations and exile. That's why a lot of the PLO had to relocate to Lebanon. And indeed, the IDF followed them to Beirut in Lebanon and started a war with Lebanon to try to, destroy the PLO, the leadership in the PLO. So the whole idea of like Israel attacking Qatar, like we saw recently in the headlines, to neutralize and take out the Hamas leadership that was the negotiating team, that's nothing new. Israel started a war in 1982 with Lebanon by bombing a Palestinian children's hospital, but the overall goal for them, at least what they said, was to neutralize the PLO. So they're not averse to starting wars with foreign countries under the guise of neutralizing, the administrative officials in Palestine. But I think the short answer, the TLDR about the PLO, and I'm leaving out a lot of details, and I know that. It's been a minute since I've read Rashid Khalidi's book, The 100 Years War on Palestine, which goes through all of this extensively, as well as Norman Finkelstein's book. But I can tell you that my understanding is that after the Oslo Accords in 1994, where you had famously Bill Clinton and Yitzhak Rabin and Israeli officials kind of brokering this deal with Palestine and the PLO, which was supposed to bring about, a two-state solution. There was going to be this interim period. I mean, this is so funny. It's such a reveal to show how deeply unserious this was. But, if you want to talk about the Oslo Accords, we can go into it. The bottom line is the Oslo Accords were a failure, and they were a failure because of Israeli and United States deception and sabotage. And that is admitted by Israeli officials like Shlomo. There's a Shlomo for you. Shlomo Ben-Ami and Natan Sharansky is another one, who've all admitted that, the Oslo Accords was meant to install Palestinian subcontractors to carry out the duties of occupation on behalf of Israel. And that was the meaning of Oslo. So, the PLO was corrupt. There's no other way to think about it, really. I mean, I still wouldn't blame the PLO necessarily. I mean, if I was Palestinian, maybe I would, because I'm intimately involved with that society and I know these people and I can see the deception and the lies and the betrayal. But for me, as an American looking at this situation, it's obvious that Israel confers all the advantages. I mean, it wields all the power, and it engineered the PLO to self-destruct and be bought off and corrupted over time. So I still place blame on the entity that has all the power and created and engineered the conditions in the Gaza Strip to be what they are. But it's true that here's an interesting fact. In the Oslo Accords, for example, there were exponentially more pages in the Oslo Accords themselves written that were devoted to the status of VIP members in Gaza. And then there was so much more articles devoted to the VIP status of certain privileged people in the Gaza Strip than there was to, let's say, the right of Palestinians to return to Palestine. There was like maybe a paragraph about that. But a lot of pages devoted to all these VIP, like what the VIPs got, and that should tell you a lot about what Oslo was really about. It was about buying off certain people in the PLO to do what they're told, carry out what Israel wanted, and make sure that nothing really changes. The conflict just freezes. And so the answer to your question is that the Palestinians recognize this. They become disillusioned, okay? The Oslo Accords were in 94, all right? So 94 to 2000 and 2001 was the second intifada, which again began peacefully, but which was escalated into an all-out war on part by the IDF. That was confirmed by Israel's foreign minister at the time, or finance minister, Shlomo Ben-Ami, like I just alluded to. He admits this. So you have to ask yourself, in those 6 or 7 years from 94 to 2000 or 2001, what was going on in Palestine, that would cause them to, again, erupt and, protest, organize against That's because the situation wasn't changing. They were promised one thing, and again, betrayal. So by the time we get to 2005 and then to 2007, it's like, yes, the Palestinians correctly observed that their situation was not changing and they needed a new entity. And that's where Hamas steps in. And the one thing that can be said about Hamas is that they were honest. They were honest to the Palestinians, and they weren't lying to them like the PLO was. So that is why Hamas ultimately becomes more powerful. People like to say that Israel created Hamas. Well, I think that's being disingenuous to the actual struggle of Palestinians. The truth is that Hamas was more popular because the Palestinians were struggling and they needed another option. And I think the H group was advocating honestly and advocating for an armed resistance. So that is my takeaway. Through deception thou shalt do war. That's a Mossad quote. Yes, we know that.
We can't.
If it's not a two-state solution, then what do you think the solution is?
I think the احتلال occupation يعني will go from this plan, from this earth يعني, and we live the Palestinian in our.
That's true.
Our Palestine.
Do you think that's possible?
Why I can't go to Jaffa, to Haifa?
Jerusalem.
Yes.
Yeah, she's saying, look, she's illuminating a war crime. She's like, I can't even, I don't have freedom of movement in my own country. Imagine me, in New Orleans not being able to travel to Baton Rouge or something because of the blockade, because of the occupation. That's what these people are facing. Imagine being in New York City and not being able to go to Boston or Jersey. I don't know why you'd want to go to Jersey, but let's just assume you needed to. You couldn't be able to do it, okay? Because of the occupation. That's what they're talking. That's a war crime, folks. Finger bang that like button or your mom is gonna get it tonight when I see her. Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe to the page to help it grow. And if you'd like to support my work, join my Patreon for exclusive content.